The world does not see you. It sees the signal you send. It sees the way you walk into a room, the way you hold your position when someone challenges you, the way you respond to disappointment or opportunity, or the quiet moment when nobody is watching and you choose what to do with it anyway. The world does not read your resume. It does not know your history. It does not factor in the circumstances, the setbacks, the things that happened before that you are still carrying without anyone around you knowing. The world reads one thing: how you think about yourself, not what you say about yourself, not the version of confidence you perform in the moments when you remember to, the deep operating belief, the one running silently underneath everything about what you are worth, what you deserve, what is and is not possible for a person like you. That belief is not invisible. It radiates, and everything around you, the opportunities that find you, the people who approach you, the rooms you end up in, the deals you close, the relationships that form, the outcomes that arrive, all of it is organizing itself around that signal, whether you know it or not. Machiavelli understood this, not as philosophy, not as theory, as observation, as the clinical mapping of a man who watched how the world responded to different kinds of people across decades of the most politically charged and consequential environments ever recorded. And what he saw is the same thing he always saw underneath everything else. The world does not create the person. The person creates the conditions that the world responds to. In this video, I am going to show you exactly how. Before the specific shifts, I need to show you the mechanism, because understanding the mechanism is what makes everything else possible. Most people believe that their identity is a reflection of their experience, that who they are is the accumulated result of what has happened to them. This feels obviously true. It is also only half the story. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote that fortune controls roughly half of human outcomes, the circumstances you were born into, the moment in history you happen to inhabit, the events that arrive without invitation. Half. The other half he attributed to what he called virtù, not virtue in the moral sense. Virtù, in Machiavelli's framework, was the force of a person's own capacity, the ability to shape circumstances rather than simply be shaped by them, the discipline to act on the world rather than waiting for the world to act on you. And the foundation of virtù, the thing that made it possible at all, was not talent, was not intelligence, was not connections or money or favorable birth. It was the way a person saw themselves. Machiavelli understood that the man who believed himself capable of shaping his world behaved in ways that shaped it, and the man who believed himself subject to his world behaved in ways that confirmed his subjection. Not because of some mystical force, because belief produces behavior, and behavior produces outcomes, and outcomes over time produce the evidence that confirms the original belief. This is the loop, and every person alive is running it. The only question is, which version of the loop are you running? Shift 1. Stop thinking of yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. This is the deepest and most damaging of all the limiting beliefs most people carry, because it is the most socially reinforced. From the beginning, you were trained into a system of selection. Someone chose whether you passed. Someone chose whether you got the role. Someone chose whether you were hired, promoted, included, validated, seen. And so you learned to present yourself for selection, to perform in the ways that made choosing you easy, to soften the edges that might cause friction, to wait patiently in the queue because someone at the front would eventually get to you. Machiavelli had no patience for this posture. He understood that the man who waits to be chosen has outsourced the most important decision of his life to someone who does not have his interests at heart. The person doing the choosing is not choosing based on your potential. They are choosing based on their needs, their comfort, their assessment of how much disruption you will or will not cause to their existing structure. And the most interesting people, the most capable people, the people who will eventually build something that matters, almost always cause some disruption, which means the selection system is specifically designed to filter them out. The shift Machiavelli points toward is from presenting yourself for selection to building something that makes selection irrelevant, not waiting to be chosen, choosing what you build, who you build it with, what standard of work you hold yourself to, regardless of whether anyone has formally authorized you to yet. The moment you stop asking permission to take up the space you already deserve, the entire dynamic around you shifts. People feel that shift before they understand it, and they respond to it by treating you differently. Shift 2. Think of yourself as the author, not the character. There are two very different relationships a person can have with their own life. The character lives inside the story. They react to what happens. They are shaped by the events around them. Their mood is a function of their circumstances. Their confidence rises and falls with their results. Their sense of themselves is assembled from the feedback of the world around them. The author stands outside the story and decides what it means, not what happens in it. You cannot always control what happens, but the author controls the meaning assigned to what happens, whether a setback is an ending or a turning point, whether a rejection is evidence of unworthiness or information about a wrong fit, whether a failure is a verdict on who you are or data to be used in the next attempt. Machiavelli was the ultimate author of his own story. Tortured and exiled, a character in that story would have been broken. The author sat down and decided what it meant. He decided it meant clarity. He decided it meant freedom, to write the truth that his previous position had required him to soften. He decided it was not the end of his story, but the beginning of the chapter that would outlast all the others. The question is not what happens to you. The question is always who is deciding what it means. Shift 3. See your current position as temporary and your direction as permanent. Most people do the opposite. They see their current position as the defining reality, the one that explains who they are, what they are capable of, what is realistic to expect from their life. And they see their direction, their values, their intentions, the things they say they are building toward, as conditional. Something they will commit to fully when the conditions improve, when the circumstances shift, when there is enough stability to finally move toward the thing they actually want. Machiavelli understood that this inversion is precisely what keeps most people exactly where they are, because conditions never improve first. Direction changes conditions. The man who commits to his direction with the same certainty regardless of his current position creates a different gravitational field around himself. He makes different decisions. He asks different questions. He notices different opportunities because he is looking through a different lens. And slowly, then suddenly, his circumstances begin to reflect his direction, rather than his direction being held hostage to his circumstances. Your position is a fact. Your direction is a decision. Make it unconditional and watch how differently everything around you organizes. Shift 4. Think of every setback as intelligence, not verdict. This is the one that changes everything about how fast you move, because the single greatest tax on progress is not failure. It is the interpretation of failure. When a setback is received as a verdict, as evidence that you are not capable, not ready, not the right person for the thing you are trying to build, it does more than slow you down. It changes how you approach the next attempt, more cautiously, more defensively, with one eye already looking for the confirmation of what the last failure seemed to say. Machiavelli was a student of failure, not his own exclusively, but of every prince and general and statesman who had ever been studied or recorded. And what he observed consistently, relentlessly, across every era and every culture was this: the men who built lasting things were not the men who failed less. They were the men who extracted more from each failure, who asked, not what does this say about me, but what does this tell me about the approach? What specific assumption was wrong? What variable was not accounted for? What the gap between the expected outcome and the actual one is telling me about the terrain I am navigating? Setbacks are information, expensive information, but information nonetheless. The person who receives them as intelligence moves forward with better data every time. The person who receives them as verdicts stops moving forward at all. Shift 5. Think of yourself as someone who creates value, not consumes it. This is the shift that changes your relationship with every room you enter. The person who enters a room as a consumer is asking a silent question before they even speak. What is here for me? What can I take from this environment? Who in this room might be useful? What opportunity might I be able to access? That posture, however natural it feels, is felt by everyone around them before a single word is exchanged, and it produces a very specific response: guardedness, a slight closing of the environment around the person because the environment has correctly identified them as someone who is there to extract. The person who enters as a creator is asking a completely different question. What can I bring here? What does this room need that I am uniquely positioned to offer? What problem can I solve? What connection can I make for someone else? What can I add to this conversation that was not there before I arrived? Machiavelli understood that the most powerful people he observed were almost never the most extractive. They were the most generative. They created conditions around them that made other people better, more capable, more connected, more resourced. And in doing so, they built a loyalty and a gravity that no extractive strategy could ever replicate. Walk into every room as the person who is there to add something, not because it is virtuous, because it is the most powerful way to move through any environment that exists. Shift 6. Stop comparing your position to others. Start comparing your direction to your potential. Comparison is not inherently wrong. Comparison in the right direction is one of the most powerful diagnostic tools a person has. But the comparison most people make is horizontally oriented. They look at the person beside them, the person who started at the same point, who had similar resources, and who appears to be further along. And that comparison breeds one of two things: either a corrosive resentment that quietly poisons every decision they make because everything becomes about catching up rather than building, or a false comfort when the comparison falls in their favor and they relax into a relative position that means nothing in absolute terms. Machiavelli had no interest in horizontal comparison. He studied the greatest leaders across all of recorded history, not to measure himself against his contemporaries, but to understand what was actually possible for a human being operating at the highest level of their capacity. The Machiavellian comparison is vertical. Not where am I relative to the person beside me, but where am I relative to where I could be? What is the gap between my current behavior and the behavior of the person who is operating at the full height of what I am capable of? That gap is the most honest and the most useful information you will ever have, because it points you toward yourself, and the person who is pointed toward themselves rather than toward everyone around them is the person who actually closes the gap. Shift 7. Think of yourself as someone the world will eventually have to reckon with. This is the shift that will make some of you uncomfortable. Good. That discomfort is the signal that this is the one you need, because most people have been trained through years of social correction to keep their sense of their own significance within a very acceptable range. Not too low because that is recognizably self-destructive, not too high because that is arrogance, and arrogance is socially dangerous, and socially dangerous is corrected immediately by the people around you. And so most people settle into a middle, a comfortable smallness that asks nothing too large of them and does not risk the social cost of claiming something that might not arrive. Machiavelli was not a comfortable man. He was a man who believed that the quality of his thinking, the depth of his observation, the precision of his understanding of human nature was not a small thing. He wrote from a place of genuine belief that what he was producing was worth the attention of the most powerful men in the world. And he was right. Thinking of yourself as someone the world will eventually have to reckon with does not mean believing you are already the finished article. It means believing that the thing you are building, the discipline you are developing, the quality of person you are in the process of becoming is worth the seriousness with which you treat it. That seriousness is felt by everyone around you before you have said a word. And the world rearranges, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped asking it for permission to believe in yourself at the level you always should have. 7 shifts. Stop waiting to be chosen. Become the author, not the character. Make your direction unconditional. Receive every setback as intelligence. Enter every room as a creator. Compare yourself only to your potential, and think of yourself as someone the world will have to reckon with. Now, I want to say something about these 7 things that is more important than any one of them individually. None of them are things you do once. They are not realizations you arrive at, check off, and then carry forward automatically. They are practices. Daily, deliberate, sometimes inconvenient practices of choosing how to relate to yourself in the moments when the easier choice is the smaller one. Machiavelli was not writing about self-help in the modern sense. He was writing about the architecture of a person who had developed a relationship with themselves that did not depend on external validation to remain intact. That relationship is the foundation of everything else, not the strategy, not the tactics, not the moves and the decisions and the careful management of the world around you. The foundation is the inner architecture, the settled, deeply held, unwavering belief in the value of what you are building and the legitimacy of the person building it. Get that right, and the world does not need to be managed. It rearranges. I want to tell you something that Machiavelli never wrote directly, but that runs underneath every word he ever put to paper. He believed in the human capacity to shape the conditions of one's own existence more than almost any thinker who ever lived. Not naively, not without acknowledging the role of fortune and circumstance and the forces that operate outside our control, but with a fierce, almost defiant certainty that the half that belongs to us is worth every ounce of the discipline and the courage and the relentless, honest work of becoming the kind of person who uses it well. You are already thinking about yourself in some way. The question is whether the way you are thinking is the one that serves you, whether the story running underneath your decisions is the one you would choose if you were choosing deliberately, whether the signal you are sending into every room, every conversation, every opportunity is the one that reflects the person you are actually becoming or only the person you were when the story began. You can change the story, not by pretending the old chapters did not happen, by deciding what they meant, by becoming the author of what they were preparing you for, by choosing the belief about yourself that produces the behavior that creates the evidence that makes the belief undeniable. The world will rearrange itself, not because you wished it to, because you became the kind of person whose presence demands a different arrangement. If something in this video shifted something in how you see yourself, then do 3 things. First, identify the one belief about yourself that is most quietly costing you the most, not the most obvious one, the one that runs so deep you barely notice it as a belief at all. It feels like just the way things are. That one. Question it honestly. Second, hit the like button. Not for me, because somewhere out there someone is running the wrong loop, believing the wrong thing about themselves at exactly the moment when believing something different could change everything. Help this video find them. And third, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because this channel is built for one specific person, the person who refuses to accept that the story they were handed is the only story available to them, who wants to understand how power actually moves, how the mind actually shapes outcomes, how the world actually responds to the person who has done the work of becoming genuinely difficult to ignore. The person who turns on the bell and shows up before the crowd has already demonstrated shift. 1. They did not wait to be chosen. They chose.